YouTube, KBC Live. I am back again. As you all can probably tell from the title, today what I'm going to talk about right now is about the return of Juan Manuel Lopez. As you all know, as you all have probably heard, he'll be returning February 2nd, 2013 to fight again after about a year-long ban by the Puerto Rican Boxing Commission. This will be his first fight since his knockout loss, his second knockout loss to Orlando Salido, which occurred in March 2012. Uh, you know, Wama, he's had a rough year. It was a rough 2012 for him. It was supposed to be, his year of vengeance, his year that he was going to take back what he thought was his, or what a lot of people may have thought was his, rightfully from Salido. But it didn't happen. We all know he was knocked out again, probably even worse than he was this first time. And what I'm here to talk about today is not so much Juan Manuel Lopez's return per se, but the dangers of this return, and why basically it is dangerous. We all probably remember that in the interview after his second fight with Salido, after he was knocked out and he, regained, his conscience, got his footing back, his ground, Juan was interviewed by Jim Gray, the Showtime interviewer, and he was basically asked, why he thought he lost the fight, what happened, that instant, those kind of things, and Juan basically said he basically blamed the referee at the time and his son, who refereed the first fight with Salido, that they were gamblers and that the reason that the fight was stopped was because they bet on the fight and they had money to collect. It wasn't because he had just gotten knocked out by Orlando Salido. It wasn't because Orlando Salido was the better man, the better fighter that night, both nights. And it was because the referees had money they had to collect from bets they placed. The Puerto Rican Boxing Commission didn't take very well to this, and this resulted in Juan Manuel Lopez being banned for about a year. I'd say a year, yeah. He's fighting in February, so a year. It wasn't very sportsmanlike. It wasn't very honorable. Juan was a champion, former champion. He was looked up, to very highly. He was being, like I said, in my article that you can read in the description. It's funny to see how quickly Juan's stock dropped as a fighter, because I remember when he was being hailed as, the next best thing to come out, out of Puerto Rican boxing, and, one of the next possible pound for pound fighters in the world, being on that list. And it's funny to see how all of that changed in just, I would say, about a year and a half, about a year. We remember his fights against Daniel Ponce de Leon, Stephen Luevano, Rogers Matagua, Bernabe Concepcion. We remember those fights, and, Juan looked good in some, and some he didn't look too great. But the thing that I really want to touch on today is that Juan being sentenced to basically what he was forbidden. Like I said, he was forbidden from fighting, training altogether. I know he was on probation. I know he had to do community service. During this hearing, I read an article on Primera Hora, which you guys can read in the description. It's all in Spanish, so if you read Spanish, you'll understand. If you don't, then Google Translator, but whatever. I remember reading in that before, after it had came out, Primera Hora basically said in the hearing that Juan admitted to not even remembering saying those things that he said about the referee and his son after the fight. He, word for word, what he had said was, "I remember opening my eyes in the dressing room and my team telling me what happened." And if that wasn't, really alarming enough, is, he also admitted that this wasn't the first time that this had happened. This memory loss, this essentially he blacked out. He, similar to how when you drink too much, you black out. That was basically what happened to, Juan Manuel Lopez. And him basically also saying that this wasn't the first time it happened. He said, again, word for word, after his fight with Bernabe Concepcion, what happened afterwards. He said he didn't remember walking to the dressing room or getting any of the post-fight blood work done. He couldn't recall any of it. And I think those two, claims coming from Juan Manuel Lopez says a lot. It says a lot about his health right now and where he's at in his career and where he's at as a fighter. We all know Juan Manuel Lopez. He was, a very exciting guy. Like I said, he had his good fights, and he has bad ones. But I know we all remember the fight against Rogers Matagua, where, Juan Manuel Lopez was a champion, and he had beaten guys like Matagua. Maybe not as tough as Matagua, but journeyman like Matagua, and he went life and death with this guy. And I remember watching that and seeing him holding onto the ropes to stand up, and how the referee basically let him win that fight, because if you can't hold onto the ropes to stand up, and essentially, I mean, you have to either get points deducted for that. But Juan did stay on his feet, and he did end up getting the decision. It was a very close decision, but that was a fight that many people thought Juan should have won. No thought about it. And the fact that he didn't look very good in that fight, he went life and death with a guy who could be considered a club fighter. Rogers Matagua has a lot of losses. I really don't know how many. I know it's a lot, though. It's at least in the teens somewhere. And, Juan Manuel Lopez, had that fight. He had the fight with Bernabe Concepcion, which he did win. He did knock him out. But we all remember that Juan got dropped himself by a huge hook by Bernabe Concepcion, that when Juan got up, he was shaky from. So these are guys that Juan, had trouble with, that he probably should have been beating. And this has a lot to do with Juan Manuel Lopez's style. He's, a brawler, boxer, puncher of sorts, and he's a guy that's just wide open. He just likes to go in there and throw bombs and bang away. His style isn't suitable for a long career. It just isn't. And I think now that that's starting to show. And I think that Juan admitting himself that he's having memory loss. I think I really don't know how more obvious it can be, and I think that this kind of was swept under the rug. I think his team altogether and Juan himself, they've kind of just been like, he's cool, he's fine right now. And the problem is that we as people, sometimes we don't like to pay attention to things until they get bad, or until it's so bad that we have to pay attention to it. And I'm not here to spread any bad omens on Juan Manuel Lopez, but I think it's ignorant to ignore what's happening right now and to ignore what we're seeing. This isn't made up. He said these things himself, and I really don't know. I don't know how you can just kind of ignore it. Terry Norris, it was written by the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Terry Norris, he was a light middleweight champion who had Hall of Fame fights with Sugar Ray Leonard and John Mugabe, fights that he could remember, or he could remember having. But Terry Norris himself can't remember the date of his wedding or the date of any of those fights, and alike. And now he suffers from pugilistic dementia, memory loss, depression, things of the sorts that many fighters experience, after their career. And I think what is more alarming about this is that Juan Manuel Lopez is so young. He's 29, he'll be 30 this year, and he's already showing signs of that. And that's why I'm really kind of iffy on why it hasn't really been reported. I'm sure he had CAT scans, head scans, but we can't ignore the signs. The proof is there. Doing my job,